So thank you for coming back for another episode of Mission Human Excellence. Let's read the Bible together again. It's me just solo. There were some things planned on but things happened. But regardless, I got both of my Bibles today. I got the Leadership Bible with me, and then I got my Life Application Bible with me. I like these two because one of them really just dived straight into leadership and how I can grow better as a leader. I do believe leadership is everywhere in our lives, from in the house to in the church to in our businesses, to everything that we do. Right, requires leadership. Even if we're just an employee, we're just an individual contributor. Even if you're working blue collar, leadership is still there. You can still lead your bosses. You can still lead the person that is in charge of you by the way you show up, by the way you influence people, and all that stuff. And then the second one is a Life Application Bible, because at the end of the day, if we're reading the Bible just to read the Bible, it's we're not really gaining too much of it from it. So I like the Life Application translation or description, because there's a lot of things that in this Bible we can just apply to our lives, right? So we're going to dive into both today. There's some verses that from rest of the James 1. This is from verse 9 to verse 27 that I want to dive into. But we're going to select parts of passages today just to read through some of the things that we have. And then I'll just read some of the descriptions as well, just for you to see, it's not that we as Christians, we as business leaders, that we don't know enough. It's that we sometimes just know the things that we know, but not doing the things that we know. Right? It's part of it is knowing what it is that we need to know, but then we got to go out there and do what we know. So I'm gonna be straight up today. Yes, there's more verses that just slap me in the face saying, hey, you know this already. How come you haven't been acting upon it? How come you haven't been taking action in the things that you know already? So the first part, I'm going to read verses 13 to 15. So it says, this is an NIV version. So it says, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempted me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away from their own evil desires and enticed. Then, after desire is conceived, it could give birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, give birth to death. So first of all, when tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. God doesn't tempt anybody. Right? It says in the translation here that God doesn't tempt anybody. We wonder why sometimes we go through life with temptation. We go through life with the different things that we face, right? It's not that God is tempting us. It's not that God is tempting anyone per se. The temptation always comes from the evil, the dark side, the enemy. So that's where the temptation comes from. But how come God just doesn't put a stop on all the temptations that we feel, that we ever have? And how come he just doesn't put, block everything, right? In the translation here, it says God doesn't tempt you, but God do test people. He doesn't tempt them but doesn't tempt you by seducing you to sin, but God allows Satan to tempt people. These temptations, right, is God refining your faith and help you grow in your dependence on Him, not your independence on yourself, but your dependence on Him. It's so simple. I'm sure everybody can think of some example in their lives that when it's tempted, they're like, oh, I got this. I can push through this. I think one of the best examples I have is sometimes I get tempted in just not doing anything. Like this episode, I get tempted just to skip this episode, right? That is one of the temptations that I have, and staying consistent is difficult, right? I'm tempted just to go the easy route, which is, oh, let's just skip this. Let's just skip this episode. Like, what's skipping one episode? Nobody's gonna know, right? But that is not God tempting me. That's actually my selfish desire being tempted, right? And that's where it says, but each person is tempted in verse 14 when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. For example, that's just me being lazy. That's my own evil desire. That is my own desire, right? But God is testing me in this season, in this season of creating a podcast, creating just being a creator in general. Am I going to be tempted to give in, or am I going to stay strong, stay consistent, stay disciplined, right? So I think that's one of the biggest things that for me to take in, right? It is not God tempting us. God will test me. God is testing me. Am I going to pass the test? That's on me, right? God is already testing me with just spirit laziness. Like, I don't have to do this. But if it is, if God really test us and do and have the things that we and just have the evil desires in us to come out, are we going to depend on him? Are we going to depend on the goodness of God, the strength of God, and all that stuff? Or are we going to depend on our own independence and push through? Just pushing through, right? Eventually we're going to get tired. It's also in the same verse, right? It's on a different point of view. It is so easy to just throw blame on other things, right? In the translation, it says it's easy to blame others and make excuses for our evil thoughts and wrong actions. It is so easy, being late. Oh, the baby was crying. Was the baby crying though? Right? I need to wash. I need to wash up. I need to change the baby. Did you really have to though? Right? Was it because your lack of time management, your lack of leadership, or whatever it is, that gets you to be late to meetings, to important things, to different places, right? So it's so easy to throw blame on different things. There's a list of excuses. Okay, there's all 9 of them. I'm gonna read all 9 of them, and these excuses I've used before. I'm sure some of you have used it before. And it's not a personal attack in any sort, but it is just a way for us to see where we are in our lives and what kind of excuses that we are using, so we can start fixing it, start getting rid of those excuses in our lives and start taking action to actually take responsibility, right? Take ownership in the things that we're doing. So we use excuses like these. Number 1, it is the other person's fault. Oh, he didn't do this, right? It's his fault, right? Number 2, I couldn't help it. I just couldn't help it. Okay. Number 3, everyone's doing it. Okay. Number 4, it's just a mistake. Okay. Number 5, nobody's perfect. Number 6, the devil made me do it. Well, I guess you're not praying hard enough. Number 7, I was pressured into it. Seems like you don't have your own firm ground to stand on. Number 8, I didn't know it was wrong. Okay. Number 9, God is tempting me. It says a person who makes excuses is trying to shift the blame from himself or herself to something or someone else. A strong believer, on the other hand, accepts responsibility for his or her wrong, confesses them, and asks God for forgiveness. Now, yeah, I'm definitely guilty of some of these stuff that I've said, right? By the end of the day, I know that nothing escapes God's sight. Like God knows it all, right? He knows everything that we do, knows everything that we didn't do. So it's like making these excuses, is it really just it's our own desires, right? It's our own little desires that little bit of evil in us, little bit of sin in us. And it says when it's fully grown, sin gives birth to death. So we gotta snip sin, snip this missing the mark, right? Where the root is, like at the smallest places, at the smallest little things, when they're so tiny, we gotta snip it in their butts. And this is how we continue to grow in our faith, continue to grow in our business, and really, like, if we want to keep growing in all areas of our lives, we gotta start taking responsibility and stop throwing the blame on something else. Yeah, nobody's perfect, but heck, you can strive for excellence, right? Everyone's doing it, doesn't mean it's right for you to do it, right? You gotta have your own say, you gotta have your own convictions, right? And these convictions gotta come from the Holy Spirit inside of you. Okay, so that's verses 13 to 15. James 1 verses 13 and 15. And we're gonna go through now to verse 19. Verse 19, it says, NIV. Okay, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. All right, God. Okay, verse 20. Because human anger does not produce righteousness that God desires. Verse 21. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Okay, so listening, first of all. Verse 19 talks about listening. In the Leadership Bible, it says, where to avoid prejudicial first impressions, become less self-centered, withhold initial criticism, stay calm, listen with empathy, be active listeners, clarify what we hear, and recognize the healing power of listening. And then we gotta act on what we hear. And then that's verse 22, right? So we'll dive into that in a bit. But first of all, we gotta be quick to listen, not quick to speak. This society is quick to speak, right? I get advice left and right on, I don't know, random things. I'd be like, oh yeah, the baby's doing good, as a new dad, a lot of other dads just come up to me and be like, you should do this for your baby, you should do this for your baby. I'm like, but that's not what my baby wants. That's not what my wife wants. We haven't come to one accord to say that this is what we're going to do for our kid, right? One example is like, oh, you should let your baby sleep alone by themselves. I'm like, I can't do that. Like, it's not a difficult thing to do, but do we want the baby to learn independence away from us at this early of age? I don't know, right? So there's things that we consider. There's other people that just give me advice lately, especially once becoming a new parent. Like, everybody else think they got the right way to do it, and I'm like, great. I don't know what it is that I don't know you that much. I don't have a relationship with you like that for you to just come into me and say, this is what you have to do. And you also don't know what my baby wants. You also don't know what my wife wants, and you just throw me advice, right? This is quick to speak, not quick to listen. There's the you gotta listen to basically, you listen more than you speak, right? You got 2 ears, 1 mouth. You gotta listen twice as much as you speak. When we talk too much and listen too little, we communicate to others what we think our idea is more important than theirs, right? When other people just advising me on things that I don't even asking for advice for, it's like they kind of sort of implying that whatever they do is probably more right than what I'm doing right now. The funny thing is they don't even know what I'm doing, right? It says put a mental stopwatch on your conversation and keep track of how much you talk and how much you listen. When people talk with you, do they feel that their viewpoints and ideas have values? How do you make the other person feel like their viewpoints and ideas have values? Oh, you got 2 years, so you better listen. You got one mouth, right? So speak less. You can ask more questions, be more clear on things, right? But at the end of the day, the years that you gotta listen. You have to listen empathetically. You have to listen actively, right? Knowing, not just hearing the words that the other person is speaking, but really understand what they're speaking on the level of uh, the language that just the communication, right? That is speaking at, so you can one repeat what you said, what they said back to them. That's active listening, and number two, dive into the emotions that they're speaking with, so you can understand them and have a deep conversation with them, right? Um, yes, as I'm reading this, as I'm talking about this, I'm getting more and more convicted myself, because God is working, right? God is working right now as I'm talking, because there's definitely times, maybe earlier today, I'm not going to say yes or no, that I probably didn't put this to practice, right? I probably talk a little too much and listen a lot less than I need to, and might have caused some problems, right? It says it's to be slow to angry, but I don't know if I did that, God. I don't know if I did that today, and that's okay, right? It's not about being perfect, but it's about striving to become excellent, striving to be better every single day. Um, yes, I beat myself up for not being perfect. Sometimes I beat myself up for not doing the things I know that I should be doing. But I also know, I got to give myself grace that I'm getting better every day. I'm reading God's words, and let God's word work in me every day. Let the Holy Spirit work in me every day. And, the 66 books inside of the Bible, it's you can't take that in a day, a week, or in a month, and or even a year, right? It takes time to work itself in you. It takes time to work itself in me right now, right? Every verse I read, it's doing something in me, so it can help me grow. So I hope just by listening to this podcast, listening to this episode, it's helping you grow. It's helping you just be a little bit better. Helping you be a little bit more aware, and it's helping you to be just slightly better. I don't think any one podcast is going to change anybody's lives, but I do think every podcast episode that you listen to that has value, that is helping you grow, will help you grow. Will help you grow in spirit, will help you grow in business, will help you grow in health and all that stuff, whichever topic you're listening to, right? There it is, again, like, be quick to listen, slow to speak. Again, I listen twice as much as speak. Yes, I do a podcast, but I listen to my audiobooks. I listen to my podcast, other podcasts, my pastors do. I take in a lot of content, right? I'm taking a lot of content that helped me grow, not just within the business realm, not just within, the personal realm, but in the giant realm of this thing called life that God gave us. I'm trying to grow in the directions that is most productive for me, right? And right now, reading the Bible, listening to the Bible, listening to people like John Bevere, listening to people like Craig Groeschel, pastors like that. That's been helping me grow in just obeying God's words. Continue to listen to what God has for me, and keep going with it. Right. So in this season of my life, yes, there's a lot of growth to be done, and there's a lot of listening to be done. But also I want to speak to you to make sure that you're doing the same thing, right? Now anybody can start a podcast nowadays. And I know that in the beginning the value is based on not many things, but as I continue to grow, as I continue to do better in this podcasting space, I know that value is going to be there, and I have no doubt. Right. So next verse that we're going to talk about, verse 22 says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourself. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away immediately and forgets what he looks like. Can you imagine just looking yourself in the mirror and turn around and you don't know how you look like, right? So it's like, are we forgetting that God give us this image, that God give us this look, that God give us everything that we have? God give us the word and give us the faith for us to go do the things that we need to do, but we receive the word and just hold on to it and not do anything with it, right? One of my favorite stories in Luke, actually in the Gospels, in I think 3 out of the 4 books, it's a good and faithful servant, that story, right? Can't think what it's called right now, but in Luke, it's the first servant receives 10 talents and he doubled it. He's a good and faithful servant. The second servant received 5 talents. He went out there and doubled it. That he's a good and faithful servant. The third servant got 2 talents and he hid it, didn't do anything with it. And he is the person that that didn't do good, right? So God's giving you things. God's giving you some talents, literal like gifts, talents, not just 5 talents of gold, right? But God's giving you some gifts. God's giving you some instructions. God's giving you some assignments, right? So now it's like, if God's giving you all these things, are you going out there and multiplying them, or are you just stuffing them under the bed and saying, hey, this is mine and nobody touch it and nobody will know about it, right? So this is what that verse is saying. This is what it's saying to me. If anyone listens to the word but does not do what it says, it's like you receiving a gift. You receive a gift and just throw it under bed and not do anything about what's there, right? Verse 25. Okay, verse 25. In the continuation of that. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. So don't do what verse 23 and 24 says, but do what verse 25 says, right? Now, someone who looks intently into the perfect law. So it is, I'll just read this little bit of description. I think it's pretty great. I marked it for myself. I'll just share it with you. It seems paradoxical that a law will give us freedom, right? Jocko has a great book that says discipline equals to freedom. Discipline is just the law that we set for ourselves and we follow the rules, right? So law will give us freedom, but God's law offers a true reflection of our sinful conditions and give us the opportunity to ask God for forgiveness. When we are saved by God's grace, salvation frees us from sin's control. We are no longer slaves of our selfish desires. As believers, we are free to live as God created us to live. We are free to live as God created us to live. Of course, this does not mean we are free to do what we please. Rather, we're now free to obey God. right? Doing what we please. Yes, we are free. We have the free will to do what we please, but we should not be doing that. We should be, what we need to do is we need to obey what God has asked in many, many senses, right? Many, many different scenarios. We get tempted in doing what we want to do instead of what God has us to do. Now, yes, I'm reading through the book of James, right? But it's still, I pray to God about this business, this podcast, right? What do you want? What does He want to keep this going? How does He want to keep this going? Where does He want to take it? I keep just receiving things. Yes, I love business. I think business is when done right could be a very serving centered, not self-centered. I think when business is done right, it is about the other person, not about ourselves. I think when a business is done right, it is giving value to the other person more than we receive value for ourselves. But okay, but it's also, there's so many different principles that are good but almost true in the real world, in the worldly perspective. I can continue to read this, I can continue to do this for free, but there's definitely other podcasters, there's definitely other coaches, right, going out there and just charging $5,000 for barely any value, right? But they make a buck, right? I want to give this for you, to you, for nothing. I want to give the best for you for nothing, so you can come back for more of what God has in store in this thing called Mission Human Excellence. Yes, I'm going to start a group that talk more about business, that talk strictly about business, actually. I'm going to have a few business owners to come in and talk about their experiences in owning a business and what God has asked them to do in that sense. There's going to be business education. There's going to be real world application to what it is that we get to do in business, right? That's where Mission Human Excellence is going in this season. Does that mean it's going to be in this season forever? I doubt it. I don't think so. He might, but I doubt it, because God is going to eventually work in me. So through me, He's going to work in the business and continue to grow that in a certain way, in a certain direction that I don't know where God's taking it, right? So at the end of the day, I know when we are following God's commands, when we are doing what God has asked us to do, right? This is what obeying God is looking like, and now we are free to obey Him because of the freedom that the law gives us. So I think that's a good place to end. If not the leadership translation, right? The leadership Bible says the law of solid ground. Hypocritical leaders sabotage themselves, right? If you're over there, doing the things that you hear, but you're not doing what needs to be done, you're being a hypocrite, and hypocrites don't last. Hypocrite won't last, right? So I'm gonna go out there and apply these into my lives. I got work to do. I hope you do too. I hope you didn't just listen to this and think you're perfect, because I think we all got work to do. But what we can do is not, continue to strive for excellence, continue to pursue excellence, and continue to pursue that, but knowing that perfection is never going to be achieved, even though we're, going after it. But excellence is achievable as long as we keep going in deep into God's words for us. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. This solo episode. James, this book of James, yes, it slapped me in the face a few more times already. I'm only read There's only a few chapters, 4 chapters, I think. But it slapped me in the face in the first 3 chapters. Pretty hard, pretty harsh. And as I'm taking notes, there's 5 chapters in James. As I'm taking notes and taking in the word that is here for me, right? It is transforming me, and I hope it has been transforming you just from me going for these type of episodes to help you gain a little bit of insight on what the Bible has been teaching me. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here for Mission Human Excellence. And until next time, have a great rest of your week. And till next time, I'll see you later.